And here we are, 10 years later, on the anniversary of the birth of this amazing place. And welcome to all of you. Because every year where we have these gatherings, it's like meeting family. Family that you love and family that you want to be with. And I know that's not always the case with all bits and pieces of your family. But this is a chosen family, so you're very, very special. And it is, for me, really a privilege also to be here this evening. We've been having a board meeting all day, and I think it's one of the boards where we were basically all of us there, and it again shows how committed everybody are to this place. And I'm always amazed to meet all the board member colleagues, and they are all here, and you should meet with them also this evening and say hello when we're done here. Because 10 years on of strategic litigation, intervention, etc., we're also here on the new occasion of adding another dimension to the European Centre for Constitutional Rights, namely the Institute for Legal Intervention. And what I'm absolutely sure that we will be able to do with this institute is not only to professionalize our work further by adding new dimensions in terms of academic input that we have also benefited from before, but will be even advanced now, but also collaboration with groups, with experts, with friends, with colleagues from around the world. We will be able to spread the message in ways that can be further advanced. And we will be able to learn lessons from what we do, both good ones and bad ones. And that is something that is incredibly inspiring and will be very interesting for all of us to do. When I was sitting here and thinking about what to say, and I promise you I won't speak very long, one thing that came to mind, and Wolfgang and I were just talking about, what should we say? Because you all know it all anyway, in terms of how we work and what we do. But I just wanted to give you a little piece of my conviction about why we do what we do. And it springs out every time, and every time I'm here, and also having the chance, and also in my day job, to meet with people who have suffered and who have gone through amazing experiences in terms of atrocities and abuse and wrongdoing. And when you meet with these individuals or their loved ones, survivors, families, and they work with you on achieving justice, then that is actually something that is very inspiring. And just as a little story, one of the people that this center is now representing also on the cases of Syria and the appalling atrocities that have been happening in Syria behind bars. When I was sitting down with her for about half a year ago here in Berlin, listening again to her story and why she was doing what she was doing, she told me about how she is representing as a mother her dead son. She found her dead son on a photo of the ECCHR files that came out. He was a young, inspiring dentist student. He was sort of the loved one of the family. And he was very excited when suddenly there were real and normal calls for democracy in his home country, Syria. So he went to the streets. He was demonstrating with his fellow sort of young colleagues and friends. And he got picked up by the police. And he was very, very badly tortured. But he was released. And Mariam, his mother, she thought he was safe now. He would be good. And then suddenly one day he was picked up on the street again, and he disappeared for good. And his mother started to go from door to door in Damascus to get knowledge about her son, and hopefully to get him out of jail. And she was just dismissed. And then, of course, the devastating thing happened, that she found him. And she found him on a photo. And then she wanted a death certificate for him. She wanted simply this regime to acknowledge that they had killed him. And she went to an office where they handed out these death certificates, she told me. And they did it with such an arrogance, sort of handwritten pieces of paper with numbers on them. And she said it was like handing out coupons for food. She was, of course, devastated by this experience, but she told me how she had looked around in the room and how the room was full of young women who were getting pieces of paper of loved ones who have died. And there was a very young woman standing next to her, and she got 5 pieces of paper. And she collapsed. And she went to her and she comforted her, and then she asked her, who are the people on these pieces of paper? And the young woman, she took the papers and she said, this is my little brother, this is my elder brother, this is my father, this is my uncle, and this is my fiancé. And I'm alone now. And at that moment, you could be devastated, and that would be normal. And this particular woman, this mother, she just grew in strength. Anger, but also, and this is the most important thing, determination. And she told me this was the moment where I decided 2 things. I wanted to work with these women to achieve freedom for those who were still behind bars and who could maybe still be saved. But I wanted to achieve justice. Justice for my son and justice for the others. And for me, this was such an amazing, generous thing to say from a person who was absolutely in her right to demand revenge, who would not be blamed if she said, I want the people who have done this to my son to be treated in this way themselves. But she had the dignity, the humanity, and the strength to demand justice, because she believed that her country could be a country based on humanity and not on wrongs. And that gives me, and I'm sure all of you, not only the energy to help people like that in saying when they have that humanity, that dignity, that sense of right, then it is our duty to make it as real as we can possibly do. And that is what this center does. And that is what all of you are part of. And that is where the rings in the water around the world and the connections to this center comes in. It simply spread this message about justice being possible and being real and having a place where actually there are people who are working seriously to achieve that. I think this is one of the most inspiring things I've been part of for the last 10 years. I am absolutely amazed by all the progress that have been made. And as I said, it was born out of a joint defeat in German courtrooms. But also, and I think a little bit of this, maybe naivety, but also let's go and get them. We can do better than this. We will show them. And what is really the challenge now is to keep that stone turning. To keep when we lose, or when something doesn't work, or when a justice avenue is shut down, to find another way. This is what the Institute will help do us, or to do for us. And this is what is happening now. And this is what is so fascinating. It raises the price for those who are calculating the terrible atrocities will get them to where they want to be, and there's no price to pay. But it also gives real hope and energy to those who are actually affected by the wrongs, that there is someone who takes their plight seriously and are willing to embark upon the journey of justice. So thank you for all of you, or to all of you, for everything you do. And keep doing it, keep being engaged, because this is really a center that has spread these networks for the past 10 years. And to meet people around the world now who at one point in time had a connection to this center keeps just inspiring me in my work. So thank you, Wolfgang. Thank you, everybody. And I'll give the floor now to Wolfgang to be telling us far more, of course, about the thoughts behind the new Institute for Legal Intervention, and then we'll keep passing on the buck to further colleagues. Should I keep the microphone on, or should I now take it off? What happens now? I'll keep it. I'll just keep silent. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lotte. Those of you who have been with us yesterday night when we had come together in another space might remember the scene when Miriam and Andreas tried to ask me something critical about ECCHR, and I rejected. I said, no, not today. Yeah, but that was yesterday. Yeah, as well as the up and down in our litigation. But there's one clear thing to say. On our way to justice, especially when we have a broader understanding of justice, of global social justice, these kind of cases we're carrying out are all important cases. Every single individual cases, and they're not individual cases, they are complexes of cases. Will be in its impact in a way restricted if it's not embedded in a broader political and social struggle. So this is why we constantly think of how to connect the concrete facts and the concrete arguments of a case, but also the broader theoretical and political contextualization. And it's difficult as litigators because you know that we're moving within a very traditional legal community, and most of the arguments we make about broader injustice will be ruled out by judges and prosecutors immediately, and they want to stick us to the case. And also we have to go through angles, procedural angles, or we have to procedural hurdles, which don't allow us to talk about the broader issues. So what we're doing, of course, we say, then we try to communicate in these kind of facts through our public outreach and through events and everything else. So it's a very common problem with us. And so what we too now trying to explain about the Institute for Legal Intervention sounds in a way very familiar to you, because it's a consequence of the work we are already carrying out, and it's complementary to it. So you might ask what's new about it. The first thing, the name, Institute for Legal Intervention, and the name is in fact very bad because, and we had a struggle with Karina about institute. I mean, what do you imagine as an institute? You imagine a building or something like that, but what we have in mind is something much more fluid, much more volatile, but find a name in English as well as in German. You're all invited if you have proposals. We ruled out hub, we ruled out platform because that's not serious enough. But institute is now the working title. More serious is the second part, Institute for Legal Intervention, because many of you are used to the wording strategic litigation. Some of you might have noticed that we, in a way, avoid this expression since a couple of years because we think it doesn't catch our work in a broader sense. Because talking about, first of all, the expression is very vague. Who is not strategic? I mean, any labor lawyer, maybe for the trade union side or maybe for the employer side, will claim to carry out strategic litigation. It says basically nothing. But above all, it keeps you on this track, losing, winning, failure, defeat, and I think that's the wrong way. We are part of a longer struggle, which was described by Colin Gonsalves earlier today. We are the warriors of the poor. We are the warriors of the marginalized, and obviously that requires much more than winning or losing in a courtroom. And so what we try to achieve with our work is some kind of intervention. The intervention might happen in the legal field. It might happen in, it might be an empowerment for the affected communities. It might have a completely different impact, and that all these kinds of impacts we try to catch with this word legal intervention. Obviously, we work in the language and in the discourse of lawyers, but we try to reach out far beyond. And that is what we now that's what we're discussing since a couple of years. And so we are carrying out many activities which are not particularly litigation. And the most important activity is that brought us together this day and all these November days since 7 years, the alumni meeting, the education program, which is also not particularly litigation oriented. It's not that the alumni or the trainees are here to assist litigation. It's much more. In order to make our message strong, we need to reach out to much more communities than only the lawyers and the prosecutors who are involved in the case. We need to spread out the message in the legal community, and of course, young upcoming lawyers are very important messengers for this. But also many others. So the education program is kind of the main pillar. So was the main pillar so far. And once again, I would like to thank Tony Tabatsnik and his team from the Bertha Foundation, who since 2012 allowed us to experiment with many different formats. And that was not only education related, but that was also a lot of exchange between different organizations. So we have our many colleagues from our worldwide network are here. I see Luis Guillermo and Alejandra from Colombia and from Mexico. I see our friends from Palestine, Joel from the Philippines just arrived, ECCHR, and others are here. And so what we're trying is not meeting us only on conference, but also having on an everyday level an exchange. We call it Bertha Global Exchange Fellows. Our latest entry, you will introduce her. Our colleague from Yemen, and that was an entry in something we will hear more about later on in transnational cooperative lawyering, in real exchange between North and South. But that requires much more than fellowships and conferences. And that's what we try to achieve with this new institute, and Karina will say more about it. But also something what we did do last years, and those of you who were with us in Berlin might have visited these conferences together with the Academy of Fine Arts, Gedächtnis und Gerechtigkeit, Memory and Justice, a dialogue between artists, activists, and lawyers on torture and crimes against humanity. And that was something for lawyers, maybe a little bit strange to say one can tackle these problems not only from the perspective as lawyers, but also from very many more perspectives. And so we continued this collaboration. We participated, for example, in the Congo Tribunal from the theater director Milo Rao. And the interesting thing was also not only that many more people speaking many more languages joined our struggle, but we also reached out to many more people, which was particularly interesting. So we kind of were able to cross the lines of our bubble. And for me, the most exciting project was actually the project where Karina was involved in, and that was our latest symposium on post-colonial injustice and legal intervention. And that was again a cooperation with the Academy of Arts, with the Federal Agency for Political Education. And it was near the Brandenburg Gate in the Academy, and the good thing was we were able to carry out our message, our method, but yeah, basically in the center of Berlin, and it had an impact on several government agencies, on several government agencies, not only in Germany, but also in Namibia. Our Namibian invited friends immediately said we have to repeat that in Namibia. We have to do something similar in Namibia. So we're going there. The Herero community, whom we invited there, came 2 months later to hook up with us, and we are now supporting them and organizing organizing a cooperation. And that is all so big and so much more than litigation that we thought that we need to give this kind of work to bundle this and to frame it in a different way. And that's the reason why we called it Institute for Legal Intervention. And it should make it clearer also to the outside world that we are not only a law firm, a kind of NGO law firm with a nice selection of interesting single individual cases, but we have a much broader message, and the broader message is the struggle for human rights and for global justice. And as I said, the conference was co-curated by myself and by Carina Theurer. Carina Theurer was last year working for the law clinic of the Humboldt University, but even more sympathetic was her work for a Latin American German literature magazine. Who of you crosses a bookstore? Some still do that. Might come across a magazine called Alba, and so she's also one of the editors of that. So she has this academic background. She has a fable for poetics. And of course, she is very familiar with our work because we were one of the first clients of the Humboldt Law Clinic. So we thought that it might make sense to hire her, and we did it. And she's the new appointed director of the Institute for Legal Intervention, and I would like to ask you to welcome her pleasantly.
Yeah, thank you very much. Also from my side, thank you to you for coming. It's a pleasure that you're here and share your time with us. The last days we have been talking about the impact of litigation, about how we can broaden our toolbox, how we can work together with social and political movements in order to make legal interventions and litigation to have more impact. Catherine McKinnon, in her writings, in her work, she describes in an excellent way how oppression and subordination is reproduced, but she also describes in an excellent way the transformative, the emancipatory potential of law. And the interesting point is that there might be a transformative potential lying outside the legal discourse. And it is interesting to have a look at that, how that could help litigation. And I think it was Peter who yesterday asked, how can we activate people? How can we motivate? How can we convince them of what we are talking about? And I think there's a huge potential in arts and literature, and also in political and societal debates. So that's where we are heading to with the Institute for Legal Intervention. When it comes to jurisprudential changes, legal norms are texts. And the power resides in who determines what they mean. So basically, if we want to change the law, if we want to bring about social justice, we have to explain again and again what meaning we want the law to have and why. And we have to advocate again and again for the legal changes in the texts themselves that we want to see in order to bring about social justice. And perhaps, and here I'm again back with Catherine McKinnon, perhaps we have to use arts and literature to enable others in this dialogue to perhaps see the law and its unjust consequences from the perspectives of those who suffer those consequences. Basically, I still remember Kranti, who in January at the symposium that Wolfgang just mentioned, told us the shocking figures of parents in India who commit suicide because basically it doesn't matter how much they work, they can't feed their families. And in a certain way, I want to believe that if you make people understand these consequences, if you really enable them to see the law and its consequences from the eyes, from the bodies of these people, that you can convince them. So I think the transformative potential of law has to link up with other dialogues. With other dialogues and also with other fields, with the academic field. You have to bring in, I think, the legal arguments in the academic area, in the academic field, so that then when you bring a claim to a court, the court can actually counter the hegemonic arguments with something that is already written in the academia. Because if there's nothing that you can rely on an academic basis, it's much more difficult to make a claim before a court. So I think, yes, litigation has to be complemented, the casework has to be complemented, and it can be strengthened this way. So this is what the Institute for Legal Intervention is aiming at, and I think we all invite you to join us in this work. The Institute for Legal Intervention will continue with the training, the education programs, strengthening it, also transnational cooperation, alliances, corporations, participating in political, societal debates, and also, of course, the symposiums, the arts work, the dialogues with arts and literature, and many more things. So I'm really looking so much forward to this work. There's so much great ideas out there, so many partners that I'm really looking forward to working with. And as Lotte said, I think there's a lot to do. There's a lot of people who want to change something. And I really think that we can do it. And sometimes when I have doubts, I just go to Caroline, who will moderate the second panel, because one evening with her and a glass of wine and you're convinced again. So,
a glass of wine is important.
So yes, I think I would then introduce or I invite you to listen to two panels. One panel will be moderated by Andreas and will be about the training of young lawyers, and the second panel will be moderated by Caroline, and it will be about transnational collaborative lawyering. And yes, very much forward to listen to them if you don't want to say something.
No, I said definitely enough. Well, I'm Andreas with ECCHR for many years, also former trainee, shortly after Alfredo, who you met already yesterday. And actually was Claire foreseen to moderate this panel as the one who's in charge of the education program at the moment, but unfortunately she's sick at home, and so as one of her predecessors also in leading the Young Lawyers program, as it was called at the time, I stepped in and have the honor to moderate this panel. And yeah, we talked a lot already about the first years, and also that the education program was always a part of ECCHR. Wolfgang said it yesterday, I think, that even before there was staff hired or funding, there were already trainees basically supporting the start of the organization. So we will reflect a little bit of that, but then also how the program developed, and then also with two board members we have here to think a bit or get some input how or some thoughts on how the institute can further develop from the education program and the legal trainee program as it is today and as it developed until today. So first, Alfredo, many might know him already. He was one of the first trainees here with us in 2007, 2008, yeah. And maybe you can share a few words how you experienced, what you thought about the trainee program at the time, but also what you did as a trainee and how you saw it developing afterwards.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I was hearing Wolfgang speak of what you're planning to do now with the Institute of Legal Intervention. I felt really identified with what he said, because when I did my, it wasn't even called education program, I think. It was just like I was going to be a trainee, intern, practicum, whatever you call it. And we, of course, the highlight was that we're going to work with universal jurisdiction litigation, and that was what it was said when I was trying to be convinced of joining the ECCHR. And yes, I learned a lot about it. I learned, what extraordinary rendition meant. But a big part of the job of what I actually did had a lot to do with things they want to do now separately or give their own things on their own. I remember when I started, one of the first things that Wolfgang gave to me was a book that was called The Pinochet Effect. And then he was like, just read this, and then ask questions later. Maybe it was a way of getting rid of me, because too many questions, of course, are annoying. But then it showed the method, how we're not just going to be focusing on, legal cases or jurisprudence or whatever. We're going to see we would have a broader picture of everything. And then, since I liked the idea, then Wolfgang thought it would be nice too that I prepare a report on universal jurisdiction in Spain. So then, the academic work was going to be taken really seriously, so I had to get this book. There was only one edition from this Spanish lawyer called Manuel Oyer, and I had to get this book somewhere. Eventually, no, Wolfgang, I can't find it. Okay, you have mine. And then I started reading a lot and then making this report for this workshop that we would have, because we also did workshops that people just learn something about an issue, like plain academic work that no one doesn't really know that the ECCHR does. And just to finish, I was very, very happy that I was talking to a friend, and because of costumes, costumbre, I was telling her, I'm going to Berlin because I'm going to the ECCHR, and I was going to tell the ECCHR is a center of, I know what the ECCHR is, and I was like, oh, okay, a Mexican friend just not living in Germany, she knows what it is, so I was very, very happy.
Great, thank you very much, and maybe also to add from my experience as trainee at the time, there were already some forms of the format what we have today is lunch talks, so that experts and people who are in the city come in and give a talk to a group of trainees and some stuff. So that happened already at the time, I think without the lunch part, but as a talk, and it was always inspiring to have these discussions in small groups, and I think it also furthered the development of program ideas within ECCHR, and as there were not so many people at the time, it was also a lot of talks with trainees and staff, and just thinking where to move with certain cases and program areas. And at the same time, when there were other guests coming and having meetings, rather going out to this bakery around the corner of the House of Democracy and sitting there with Wolfgang and Michael Redland discussing the Rumsfeld case in this bakery. So quite different from where we would do it today in these nice rooms here. And basically these were the first years where, yeah, there were interns or trainees, but it wasn't that much a program with a concept, with a curriculum and all that. So because that would have needed much more input work, conceptualization and all of that. And when then in 2012 the Bertha Foundation came in as the first funder for the education program, of course that made a huge difference to the work before. Suddenly there were people working full-time on the program and developing it with a curriculum with, as Wolfgang said before, a number of different aspects. And Annelene, you were the first Bertha Justice Fellow at ECCHR, but you also did already your traineeship before at ECCHR and at ECCHR, our partner organization in Colombia, with whom you also worked then afterwards. So maybe you can share a bit how the program looked like and developed in those years, and also where it took you.
Sure. Yeah, so actually, as Alfredo mentioned the Pinochet effect and universal jurisdiction, I can't help but also share the memory that I met Wolfgang for the first time in summer 2008 at the conference with Baltasar Garzón in Spain, and that's when he gave me one of the very first flyers of ECCHR, and that's sort of also when my whole idea started to work here. And it just seems ages ago, and the 10 years just really flew past. So then 2011 I started my traineeship here and also with ECCHR for several months on a joint project, the Nestle case, and then started to work here in 2012, and that's when the contact with the Bertha Foundation got established and really took on a different shape, the education program, and then also at some point we weren't called young lawyers anymore, but legal trainees, and whole discussion about the name of everything, and the lunch talks, and sort of the curriculum developed much more, I think, and is still developing. And I think for me the most important part really was always the exchange, of course, between the staff and the trainees, and the very close relationship, and sort of to have the trust put in you to actually go forward, go ahead with the project and do some good work, and make us go to Colombia and work on a joint project there. And I think that was always really important to me, and also what we could learn from the trainees coming from different parts. And I think that's been becoming even bigger now, sort of that impact you can have with persons coming from all over the world to share their experiences and being young lawyers, but also sort of being role models, not only the senior persons in ECCHR, but also sort of each other, learning from each other. So I think that's really been a great development to see, and I think also what this alumni reunion really is doing and achieving, to really reflect on the time at ECCHR and to see what everyone is doing now. And it's really great to see where sort of former trainees are at now, and where everyone is really trying to continue their work from ECCHR, and sort of the ideas we one time sort of debated here over some coffee or a lunch talk. So I think that's been really, really good to see. And also the global exchange program, I think, is an important part of it, to bring people to Berlin and to be able to work on concrete projects here with really support from Colombia, for example, in the case when Viviana came to Berlin. I think that was a really important part of that project as well, and to broaden our perspective as well, being based here. And I think also the importance of going out and actually having practical insights in other organizations in other countries. So maybe, I mean, that's not yet being done, but maybe will come in the future as well, of more of ECCHR trainees or staff going out and being a global exchange fellow somewhere else, and it works in both ways. And so for myself, and then ECCHR offered that I could come and work with them for 2 years, it was just an amazing opportunity, also with the peace process going on, and to be there and sort of experience both sides, which, I mean, before then we were working very closely together, and I already knew a lot about ECCHR, but it's quite different to actually be in a place for 2 years and work a lot with indigenous communities and on the ground, and not just fly in and do some investigations for a couple of weeks or 2 months maybe, which is as long as I stayed beforehand. So yeah, I think that's been really just fascinating development, and the Bertha network absolutely had a big role in that, and is still something I draw upon a lot, and it's wonderful to meet everyone here and in other spaces, and yeah, so it's been a great development, I think.
Yeah, thank you very much. And as it was mentioned with the already 7th alumni meeting, so at one point there were enough alumni to also have an alumni meeting, which happened then a couple of years ago. And now if you see, of course, how many people are around here these days, the numbers are certainly growing. It also helped in the past 2 or 3 years that the Kreuzberger Kinderstiftung also supported trainees from all over the world to come here for 5 or 6 months to stay with ECCHR, so that further certainly put the level of participants at the legal trainee program to another level. And I mean, with all the discussions we have in the trainee meetings, at workshops we do here from time to time, and then on specific topics, also lunch talks. You also see that these discussions are on a really high level and really rich with all the partners coming in from all these, or trainees from all these different backgrounds, and we are more and more able to enable them coming, also in cooperation with a number of university programs. Of course. So, Tobias, I'd like to ask you, as member of the board, professor of criminology, so from your outside perspective on ECCHR, but also being part of the board, and working, of course, with students, teaching, having a lot of input at the academic side and insights. How do you see the education program, the legal training program, until now, and where would you see it when it shifted to the institute? Some room even for strengthening it, or to stress what's already important?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's quite clear that the work of the ECCHR in the past 10 years is an incredible success, and from my point of view, the education program is maybe the part of the ECCHR which is most important for that, because the education program is that part that makes it possible that so many young people, engaged people, are here today and are here every year. And I think this is really important. If I talk to my students, so national law students, and if I ask them why they decided to study law, you have normally 2 big groups. One group tells you they had no other idea, and they think with law you can do everything later on, and so they decided studying law. And on the other hand, you have the people who say they want to earn a lot of money. But besides that, of course, you have a quite smaller group which is politically interested and have political ambitions, and tries to combine this with law work and with judicial work. And I would say till 10 years ago there were basically 2 ways for doing that. First, fundamental rights, and on the second hand, litigation and lawyers' work in criminal defense, or social law, or migration law. And what the ECCHR managed to do is to open a new perspective in this field and to offer something new, a special new looking on the law, using law as resource for achieving political things, especially human rights. And I think this is really important, especially for the people who have a political idea, who want to achieve something in this way with the law. And I'm very glad that we have this perspective now, and I'm also very glad that it's possible to strengthen this perspective with the Institute.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And I would also like to bring you in, Andrea, and hear from you with a different perspective, mostly on diversity, given all your work as professor in Göttingen and elsewhere. What's your view on what we are doing here in the legal trainee program, but what's also your maybe hope or ideas you would like to see us approached by the Institute, giving this new format we launched today, which probably or hopefully enables us to go much more beyond litigation and what would you like to see there in the coming time?
Thanks for your nice invitation. Yes, I'm a sociologist. I'm a sociologist of diversity, but I'm also very interested in human rights. So I'm very proud to be part or member of the board. I would like to talk about two keywords. They are interdisciplinarity and intersectionality. Some of you know them. Perhaps I think it's very important to have this new institute because there you can put together your experience of your cases and you can develop a new theory of intervention. And I'm lucky to be part of a discussion years ago about what's the meaning of resistance or intervention. You attended this also. But I think it's important to embed these intervention into an idea of society, as a sociologist, of course, and to have an idea of the things, what is resistance, what is intervention, and what are the power relations which are important to think about resistance and not resistance. I think this is very important, and I think this has to be done with different disciplines. Not only sociologists, but also political sciences or philosophers thinking about ethics things, and also, of course, people from the political sciences. I would suggest to do this in an interdisciplinary way. Perhaps you know Kimberly Crenshaw, a very important lawyer in the feminist or gender studies. She coined the word or concept of intersectionality. That means that people that you can't describe people only in saying I'm a professor, but all humans have a gender, they have a social background, an ethnic background. Some of them have a religious background and so on. And I think it would be important to think about these things if you are developing a theory of intervention. But I also think the Institute will be also a success story like the ECCHR, and I'm sure that the link or the nexus between theory and practice will be a happy marriage. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, and we will certainly count on you and on all of you in further developing the Institute. And I'd like now to hand over to the next panel, the last one, keeping it short so that after a long day that there will be some food and drinks also later. But first there is one more international and transnational panel on the cooperation aspect moderated by Caroline.
Every time a pleasure when I can see my dear friend Alejandra again, or Kranti, who's been coming over here too often for his health. So transnational collaboration can be a lot of fun, but we're going to talk a bit about the harder parts of collaboration, because it's not always easy. And here I'm going to turn to Alejandra, because she has been a very good analyst of transnational collaboration. She is the founder of Prodesk, a human rights organization in Mexico City, focused particularly on economic, social, and cultural rights. And after she founded that organization, at some point she wanted a year of reflection and went to do a master's in human rights in New York City. And there she wrote a master's thesis, which, Alejandra, I would now like to ask you to tell a bit about how you came to write that thesis, what your motivation was, and what it was that you wanted to tell the world with it.
Well, thank you so much for being here after a very long day of reflection and working. And also thank you to the ECCHR for this space and for the honor to share this table of reflection with Colin and with Joshua, and of course with Caroline. And I would like to start saying about, of course, my thesis, but principally the reasons of why I decided to write a thesis focused in how to build a genuine transnational collaboration. And it became an important issue for me because, principally because as a human rights lawyer in Mexico, I had the necessity to think in how to do strategic litigation in the global economy, in the framework of the global economy. And I realized that doing the strategic litigation only in the Mexican jurisdiction wasn't enough, principally because at that time, all the transnational corporations that were allowed to come to Mexico were already doing all these grave violations of human rights. So in a pretty naive way to think in building power, I started to look for collaborations with US organizations. And in the beginning, everything was a very good idea. And we tried to have relationships with these very well-known US organizations, and as a Prodesk, but also other Mexican organizations were very interested in have transnational litigation, principally in the framework of the NAFTA agreement. And what happened was that we came to this idea in a pretty idealistic moment, but we didn't thought in what are the power relationship between the North and the South, and how the different actors involved in this equation were perceiving the work of the organizations in Mexico and the work of the organization in the US. And it was a really interesting experience, principally because when I tried to explain this transnational collaboration with other actors as funders or principally funders, but also the academia in Mexico and the United States, the response was mostly that they saw this collaboration principally as the important part of the work was made by the US organizations, and the Mexican organizations were perceived principally as the paralegal side, which was a moment of clarity for me, no? But it was like, okay, and that was a reflection with academics. And another important reflection that I am always pushing to have in these kind of spaces was also with some funders when we were presenting joint projects for funding, looking for funding for some cases. Some funders were doing the difference between the US organizations and the Mexican organizations, giving more money to the US organizations than the Mexican organizations. And when I realized that, I asked why, in what basis they decided to do that. And the funders were, again, very honest. And they say, well, because the US lawyers develop their work in the US jurisdiction, and they have to have a salary in dollars, and you are living in Mexico, so we can pay you in pesos. And that kind of elements for me was like, okay, so again, law is a very important tool, and it could be used for all these amazing ideas that we had been reflecting during these 3 days about how to be like a vehicle for the social movements and how to build access to justice. But it is important also to talk about the structural differences that we have to face. And having these differences is not our fault. It's not the fault of the organizations, in our case, in the US and in Mexico. But we have to acknowledge the differences and how those differences are interpreted as privileges for one part of the equation. Because in the other way, we will be repeating the same systems that we are trying to fight against. So with that experience, I was able to win a scholarship in a university, in a law school in New York, and I spent 1 year doing my master, but also thinking in all these elements about how to develop a genuine transnational collaboration in the framework of human rights, and how to open this discussion among the human rights movement, and how to face the differences in a more honest way, also talking about the power relationships that we are reproducing among us, but also it was very interesting for me to think in what was my role as a Mexican lawyer working with indigenous communities, and if I was reproducing the same system with them, and for example with local organizations that are working on the states and not necessarily based in Mexico City, that doesn't have the same access to political spaces or to the media or even to funders. And it was also a power analysis for me, and I have to say that in our methodology as Prodesk, we are really, really focused in trying to not repeat this kind of subordination way of working, but sometimes we are doing it. But the important part that we wanted to share with this thesis, and after that, I was also able to write a small article that is an extract of the thesis that I wrote in my master in collaboration with Caroline, where we try to just summarize the more important elements of how to build a genuine transnational collaboration. But I have to say that the center is talking principally about power dynamics. And of course, being an idealist is good, and we have to keep inspiring people, and we have to keep talking about all these important issues, but we have to acknowledge that using the law could be a powerful tool, but could be also a tool of privilege for us. And in that way, we can keep doing honest work in this area.
Thank you very much, Alejandra. I learned a lot from you, and I think the concept of genuine transnational collaboration is very important. The Institute for Legal Intervention has that kind of transnational collaboration as one of its pillars and vision, what it wants to work towards. And of course, in the past, ECCHR has already done a lot of things to foster that kind of collaboration, for example, through the possibility of having what we called global exchange, which was facilitated by the Bertha Foundation. And Colin, this is where I turn to you, because we had the honor to have a couple of people coming from HRLN to work with us for a couple of months here at ECCHR. And we also had the pleasure to visit you at HRLN. So I'd like to ask you, why collaborate? And what is it that you think that made the collaboration between us successful in creating casework?
Coming to the ECCHR many years ago, 8 years ago, our first experience was a meeting where the South American lawyers were all here. I think I told you that. And the South American lawyers were talking of suing companies operating in South America, but suing them in the countries where they are registered, Switzerland, Germany, France, and so on. Which you can do. You can sue a multinational corporation here. Now, these corporations are not expecting that. They do all kinds of criminalities in the developing world, but they hardly expect that anyone would have the knowledge or the wherewithal, the capacity to sue them in, say, France or Switzerland. So that was the sort of discussion we had 8 years ago, which opened up my mind to the possibility of suing companies operating in India, doing all kinds of criminality. We have Syngenta, for example, that is introducing genetically modified food, right? Terrible devastation of the Indian agriculture. Introducing genetically modified cotton, trying to introduce genetically modified aubergine. And although the courts have stopped them from doing that, they continue. And you know, in these areas where you use genetically modified crops, the pests that come up are very strong because they are quite immune now to your pesticide system. And in India, we've had 300,000 deaths by hanging, farmer suicides over 2 decades. Can you imagine? Such is the crisis in Indian agriculture that 300,000 farmers have taken their lives. So when I came here, that's the reason why I think that's the most fascinating part of my experience. Today in the board meeting again, Wolfgang was showing off, you know, with a number of cases that he's done and all that. And I thought to myself, oh my God, I really need to catch up like anything. There's real competition, sort of, you know. So it's really exciting. It opened up. I'm only telling you one thing, but it just opens up your mind to the possibility of alliances, collaboration, learning. Each side learns, and we learned enormously. And so now we've started sending our young lawyers here with the prospect of actually setting up Business and Human Rights Unit in the Human Rights Law Network in India, where we plan to sue a lot of companies that are registered here. For example, some of the deadliest pesticides which are banned here. I think Bayer's a German company, right? And they use things that are banned here are spread in India happily. Nobody questions them, and we want to sue them here. Drugs, German companies that manufacture drugs, which are banned in Germany, are sold there. And we ask the German companies, how are you doing this? And they say, well, Indian law doesn't ban them. So we're going to test the proposition. Can a corporation which has stopped manufacturing because they know the drug is dangerous for human beings take the plea that we will sell it in a developing country merely because their laws are too lax or weak? Can they do it, really? So there's a fascinating spectrum of cases to be done, and we are totally happy with this, this arrangement with ECCHR. It's a learning thing, and I think we have many years. But I expect that we'll catch up after some time with ECCHR. That's one. When you come to India, when you come to a developing country, and I would say I'm speaking generally now, not just ECCHR people coming, you must come. You must go to the developing world. You must go to countries that are poor. Because countries that are poor have the richest experiences for any human person. And particularly if you're young, you must come. Because it teaches you to be daring. It teaches you to be fearless. Either you'll give up and never come again, which is all right. But if you come and you stay, it teaches you to be fearless. It teaches you to be adventurous. It teaches you not to be picky. It teaches you not to be, too, complaining about things. It teaches you to understand cultures. It teaches you to understand people. And it changes your body, it changes your mind, it changes your soul. And you must come for that reason. Then the litigation is totally different. And it's an experience you cannot miss, you should not miss. If you really want to be a wholesome lawyer, you must be adventurous and go to areas that your parents will tell you not to go to, or somebody will tell you not to go to, really, or whatever. Now look at the nature of litigation. I'll give you an example. 2 days ago, we had a young lawyer who just joined us, Nabila, a Muslim lawyer, a Muslim girl. So a couple came. Hindu girl from a very orthodox family falling in love with a Muslim boy who's younger than she is. Her parents sort of got a whiff that she's seeing somebody or she's in love with somebody. So her parents decided to try and get her married off. So she runs away. And she runs away and comes to our office. And she comes at the most inconvenient time at 8 o'clock in the night. Yeah, I'll finish right away. Right? This is just when the story is getting exciting. That's what I thought. Yeah. So, and she's just like 2 weeks in our office. So I tell her, Nabila, I'm going home, I'm very tired. Now you talk to them, work it out, and you might have to stay till about 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning. Get all their facts. We're asking for police protection. You'll go to the High Court tomorrow. At 10:30, you have to stand in front of the Chief Justice and say it's a very urgent matter, place it on board. Our legal system is very flexible. Wonderful system. So she gets someone to stay with her, and she works the whole night till 2 o'clock in the morning and 3 o'clock in the morning. And the next day she goes before the Chief Justice and she says, Madam Chief Justice, I want my matter heard today. Because the parents had come with a group and a gun. And they came to her, the place where she was staying, and she managed to call the police, so the police came, so they ran away. And she got the stay order, but it was a whole experience of, working the whole night. And it's the same with everything else. Starvation death takes place, you have to leave immediately and go to a remote part of the country. Then you've got to sit with the family. They're grieving over the death of an 11-year-old girl died of starvation after 3 months of not having food. Can you imagine? In a country with an 8% growth rate. So you go to the house, you record the thing, you take the facts, you go to the court, you file the case. So it's totally different litigation. It's totally different litigation. And it's a learning for the soul. It's not just law. It's not just law or doing a legal case and so on. It's learning for it's learning for your soul. It makes you a different person. So when you go and travel to poorer countries and live with them, and I tell our young lawyers, and I'll end with that, the real thing about lawyering in poor countries is that I tell my young lawyers, never think that you've got a law degree so you're a hotshot guy. You've got to de-learn, because once you come out of law college, you have to unlearn what you've learned. And there's a phrase which Mao Zedong used, which I love using. Live among people, be among them, learn from them. And that is the motto of a lawyer in the developing country. You have to really change your whole approach, change your attitude, and learn from people.
Thank you. Thank you, Colin, for this great answer to the question, why collaborate? It's all for the soul. And now I'd like to turn, left of me is sitting Joshua Castellino. He is Dean of the Law School in Middlesex University in the United Kingdom. I heard that you actually know Colin for a long time already. First interviewing him as a journalist, and then you started collaborating by doing trainings, workshops for judges. And my question to you is about a particular kind of collaboration, which is about universities with human rights organizations. Maybe you can tell a bit as to what that particular collaboration can offer to both worlds.
Sure. Thank you very much for that question. I have to say this is a totally unfair situation to have to speak after Colin and after speaking about Colin's different takes on life. It's a real privilege to be here, and my hashtag would have been #privileged, because I've been privileged enough to know and work with so many of these people over the years and to see the energy that they inspire in other people. But I guess the context of, and it's a real privilege to celebrate the 10 years of ECCHR and to think about the next 10 years and how this institute could perhaps even change the focus of the work that you do. And I think perhaps the starting point towards answering your question is to say what Colin finished off with, which is you have to de-learn the stuff you learn in law school. I'm involved in designing curricula in law schools. That's what I do. I'm an academic, and like legends that we have here, like Manfred Nowak, we try to teach the law, but very often we take received wisdom that has been distilled to us through centuries. We don't pay enough attention to the contemporary work that's taking place now. How do you fit that into a curriculum? The result is that you get a curriculum that's really at best 50 years old, but it's not really going to equip people with the skills and the contemporary knowledge. I'm not against Hegel and Kant, but we need to also hear from Kalec and Gonsalves, and we need to understand their take on the way on the situation that we face, especially if we are talking about intensive and entrenched situations like poverty, entrenched situations like unequal opportunities, and distance between victims and access to law. Those are the kinds of questions that are being negotiated and understood in courts of law around the world now, not really through the ancient philosophers, good as they might be and interesting as a framework they might provide. So that's the big gap, I think. And in a sense, I suspect I'm at this platform now because I happened to have a conversation with Wolfgang about this in December in Stockholm when we were at Colin's Right Livelihood Award victory. And I think in that point, one of the things I was trying to say is we need to find different vehicles in which we can engage practitioners, the wider public, and law students to think through the kinds of contemporary challenges that are faced. And it's in that particular context that I suggested that one vehicle might be the use of summer and winter schools. So these are setups that are outside the mainstream law curriculum. They are open to a wider number of people. Not everybody can afford. Certainly, I come from a society now that charges fees, and if that was bad, we're now also Brexiting. So, this is a steady slide away towards an oblivion of human rights and towards an oblivion of providing access to remedies for all. But if you look at that particular context, not everybody can have access to have the privilege of a legal education. So we need to change the way in which we do this outreach work. We need to get the voices of contemporary actors into our curricula so that the mainstream lawyers who are studying law understand where the challenges really lie. And that's not just for human rights law, by the way. It's as much for corporate law, intellectual property rights, or any other branch of law you might have. So that's one challenge. Another challenge is to make sure that practitioners continue to learn from each other. Your point on collaboration. I often think of the 3 C's. The 3 C's you might know in the colonial context was Christianity, commerce, and civilization. I think of the 3 C's as critique, collaboration, and construction. We need to rethink how we can use that and learn from each other's experiences in very different settings. The kind of work that Alejandra does in Mexico City has some echoes for Colin in New Delhi, but doesn't have that many echoes perhaps in Berlin. But actually, each of them can learn something from each other. We need to create those fora where they learn and we get the privilege of learning alongside them. So I thought the idea of a summer and winter school would be an interesting exercise for the Institute to pursue. And if you can go one step further and credentialize these by giving them these ECTSs, European Credit Transfer System, by putting stuff around it that makes it count towards education, then you'll immediately also find that the people that emerge from it will get some kind of professional ethos and professional uplift. So that in as concrete a way as I could, is the centrality of the idea.
Excellent. If you Google genuine transnational collaboration and you put Alejandra Ancheta to it, you will find one of the pieces you can put to the law school curriculum. And with that, I wish you a very good evening.